The prairie wind howled across the desolate Montana territory as dawn broke over Samuel Creek's weathered homestead. His calloused hands gripped the wooden fence post, eyes scanning the horizon where dust clouds danced like ghosts against the amber sky. 3 years of backbreaking labor had carved this small sanctuary from the unforgiving wilderness. But on this morning, everything would change. The sound of desperate hoofbeats shattered the silence, growing louder with each passing second. Samuel squinted through the morning haze, watching a lone rider approach at breakneck speed. The horse stumbled, foam specking its muzzle, while its rider swayed precariously in the saddle. As the figure drew closer, Samuel's weathered face registered shock. Beneath the dust-caked traveling cloak and wide-brimmed hat rode not a man, but a young woman, her dark hair whipping wildly in the wind. Her eyes, wide with terror, locked onto his as she pulled the exhausted mare to a halt near his gate. Without hesitation, she slid from the saddle and collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Samuel rushed forward, his boots crunching against the dry earth. The woman looked up at him with pleading eyes that seemed to hold secrets darker than the approaching storm clouds. Her clothes, though travel-worn and dirt-stained, spoke of quality and refinement that had no place in this remote corner of the frontier. A delicate gold locket hung from her neck, catching the early morning light like a beacon of her mysterious past. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. "They're coming for me. I have nowhere else to go." Samuel felt his heart clench at the desperation in her voice. He had lived alone on this homestead for too long, speaking only to his livestock and the occasional passing trader. The loneliness had eaten at him like a slow poison, but he had learned to be cautious of strangers in this lawless land. Yet something in this woman's eyes spoke to the decent man he still was beneath the hardened exterior. "Who's coming for you, miss?" he asked, helping her to unsteady feet. She glanced nervously over her shoulder toward the distant hills where her trail disappeared into the rocky terrain. "Men who believe I possess something that belongs to them," she replied cryptically, clutching the locket at her throat. "I cannot tell you more without putting you in danger." Samuel studied her face, noting the high cheekbones and refined features that suggested Eastern breeding. Her hands, though roughened by recent hardship, bore the telltale softness of someone unaccustomed to manual labor. This was no frontier woman, but someone who had fled from a life of comfort and privilege. The first hook comes here as Samuel notices something that makes his blood run cold. In the distance, barely visible against the morning landscape, a line of riders appears on the ridge. Too far away to count accurately, but close enough to spell trouble. The woman follows his gaze and her face goes pale as parchment. "They've found me," she breathes, her voice trembling with fear. Samuel makes a split-second decision that will alter the course of both their lives. "Get inside the barn," he commands, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Hide in the loft behind the hay bales. Don't make a sound, no matter what happens." She nods gratefully, gathering her torn skirts as she hurries toward the weathered structure. Samuel watches her disappear into the shadows before turning his attention back to the approaching riders. He counts them now, his experienced eye taking inventory of the threat. 20 men, all armed and riding with the purposeful determination of a hunting party. Their leader, a tall man with silver hair gleaming beneath his black hat, sits his horse with military precision. As the riders draw closer, Samuel notices details that make his stomach tighten with apprehension. These are not ordinary outlaws or drifters. Their horses are well-fed and expertly trained. Their weapons are clean and properly maintained, and their clothing speaks of organization and resources. The leader's coat bears subtle military decorations, while several of the men wear identical silver pins on their lapels. This is no ragtag band of criminals, but something far more dangerous, a private army with backing and purpose. The silver-haired leader raises his hand, bringing the group to a coordinated halt 50 yards from Samuel's cabin. The morning air grows thick with tension as man and riders regard each other across the divide. Samuel forces his expression to remain neutral, the poker face he had perfected during his years as a cavalry scout serving him well. "Morning, gentlemen," he calls out, his voice carrying the right mixture of caution and frontier hospitality. "You're riding pretty early for social calls." The leader's pale eyes sweep across the homestead, taking in every detail with calculating precision. His gaze lingers on the barn where the woman hides, and Samuel feels sweat begin to bead on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Name's Colonel Marcus Whitman," the leader announces, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to obedience. "We're tracking a fugitive who passed this way. Young woman, dark hair, riding a bay mare. Would have arrived here within the last hour." Samuel scratches his beard thoughtfully, buying time while his mind races through possible responses. He knows that lying to these men could cost him his life, but harboring their quarry might prove equally fatal. Yet something about the colonel's cold demeanor and the military precision of his men sets off every warning bell in Samuel's experienced mind. "Can't say I've seen anyone matching that description," he replies carefully. "I've been up since before dawn tending to my stock. Pretty quiet morning out here." The colonel's eyes narrow slightly, and Samuel notices the man's hand resting casually on his sidearm. Several of the mounted men shift in their saddles, creating an almost imperceptible tightening of the circle around Samuel's property. "That's curious," Whitman muses, his voice carrying a dangerous undertone. "We followed her trail directly to your doorstep. Fresh horse tracks, still warm. You telling me you didn't see or hear anything unusual?" "Samuel Creek," Whitman repeats slowly, as if tasting the name. "Former cavalry scout, served under General Morrison in the Apache campaigns. Decorated for valor at Canyon Ridge. Quite a reputation you built for yourself, Creek." Samuel keeps his expression neutral, but inwardly he curses. His past is catching up with him in the worst possible way. "That was a long time ago, Colonel. I'm a civilian now, just trying to make an honest living." Whitman steps closer, close enough that Samuel can see the calculation in those pale eyes. "See, that's what makes this situation so interesting, Creek. A man with your skills and experience doesn't simply miss a desperate woman crashing into his property. You'd have heard her coming from a mile away." The accusation hangs in the air between them, and Samuel realizes that his military background has become a liability. These men expect him to be observant and capable, making his denials seem increasingly hollow. "I'm getting older, Colonel," Samuel says with a slight shrug. "Maybe I'm not as sharp as I once was." Whitman's laugh is cold and humorless. "Or maybe you're exactly as sharp as you ever were, which is why you're lying to me right now." The tension escalates as Whitman signals to his men with a subtle hand gesture. Samuel recognizes the command from his military days, a signal to prepare for action. Around the property, the riders adjust their positions, creating overlapping fields of fire that would make escape nearly impossible. Samuel realizes he is trapped in a carefully orchestrated web, with no clear path to safety for himself or the woman hiding in his barn. "I'm going to give you one more chance to tell me the truth, Creek," Whitman says, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Where is Catherine Morrison?" The name hits Samuel like a physical blow, and he struggles to maintain his composure. Catherine Morrison, the general's daughter. Suddenly, pieces of the puzzle begin falling into place. The refined bearing, the expensive clothes, the desperate flight across the frontier. This woman is not just any fugitive, but the daughter of his former commanding officer. The implications are staggering, and Samuel's mind races through the possible reasons why General Morrison's daughter would be fleeing from what appears to be a military operation. "I don't know any Catherine Morrison," Samuel says, but even to his own ears, the denial sounds weak. Whitman's smile is predatory, confirming that Samuel's reaction has given him away. "Your face says otherwise, Creek. You served under her father for 3 years. Saved his life at Canyon Ridge, if memory serves. I find it hard to believe you wouldn't recognize his daughter." Samuel realizes that his military service has become a double-edged sword. His loyalty to General Morrison is well documented, making it impossible to convince these men that he would turn away the general's daughter. "Even if I did know her," Samuel says carefully, "what business would that be of yours?" Whitman's expression hardens, and Samuel sees something dangerous flicker in those cold eyes. Catherine Morrison is a thief and a traitor, the colonel declares. She stole classified military documents and fled into the wilderness. We're here to bring her back to face justice. The accusation rocks Samuel to his core. The frightened woman hiding in his barn, a thief and traitor? It seems impossible, yet Whitman's conviction appears genuine. Samuel finds himself caught between conflicting loyalties, unsure who to trust or believe. Those are serious charges, Colonel, Samuel says slowly. What kind of documents? Whitman's jaw tightens, suggesting he has revealed more than he intended. That's classified information, Creek. All you need to know is that she's a dangerous fugitive who must be apprehended. The colonel's evasiveness only deepens Samuel's suspicion. In his experience, legitimate military operations were conducted with proper transparency and chain of command. This secretive pursuit feels more like a personal vendetta than an official mission. If she's truly a fugitive, Samuel presses, where are your arrest warrants? Your military orders? Surely you have proper documentation for an operation of this scope. Whitman's smile turns icy, and Samuel realizes he has pushed too hard. You're in no position to question my authority, Creek. Stand aside and let my men search your property, or be charged as an accessory to treason. The threat is clear and immediate, but Samuel has spent too many years on the frontier to be easily intimidated. He has learned to read men's characters, and something about Whitman sets off every instinct he possesses. The standoff intensifies as both men measure each other, predator and prey locked in a deadly dance of will and deception. Samuel's mind races through his limited options, weighing the risks of continued defiance against the certainty of what will happen if these men find Catherine. Through the barn window, he catches another glimpse of movement, and his heart stops. Catherine is positioning herself near the loft ladder, perhaps preparing to surrender herself to protect him. Samuel knows he cannot let that happen, not until he understands the true nature of this situation. Before I let anyone search my property, Samuel says with quiet determination, I'd like to see some identification. Official papers from the War Department would be a good start. Whitman's facade finally cracks, revealing the cold fury beneath. You're making a serious mistake, Creek. Last warning. Samuel squares his shoulders, falling back on the discipline that carried him through countless battles. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, Colonel, but I've learned to trust my instincts, and right now they're telling me something isn't right about this whole situation. The confrontation reaches a breaking point as Whitman draws his sidearm in one smooth motion, the metallic click of the hammer being cocked echoing across the quiet homestead. Around the property, his men follow suit, creating a bristling array of weapons all trained on Samuel. Final chance, Creek, Whitman snarls. Step aside or die where you stand. Samuel feels the familiar calm that comes with mortal danger, the same icy clarity that kept him alive through years of frontier warfare. His own Colt .45 remains holstered, but his hand hovers near the grip with practiced readiness. I reckon if you were going to shoot me, Colonel, you would have done it already, Samuel says with deceptive calm. Fact is, you need me alive to tell you where she is. Dead men don't talk. Whitman's eyes narrow, recognizing the logic in Samuel's words. The colonel is caught in his own tactical trap, his threats rendered hollow by his need for information. The stalemate stretches between them, fraught with lethal potential and unspoken calculations. Suddenly, the barn door creaks open, and Catherine Morrison steps into the morning sunlight with her hands raised in surrender. Samuel's heart sinks as he watches her emerge from hiding, her face pale but determined. Don't hurt him, Marcus, she calls out, her voice carrying across the yard with surprising strength. I'm the one you want. Whitman's weapon swings toward her, but his expression shows satisfaction rather than surprise. Catherine, he says with mock warmth, so good of you to finally show yourself. You've led us quite a chase across 3 territories. Samuel studies the interaction between them, noting the familiarity in their exchange. These two know each other well, perhaps too well. There are undercurrents of personal history that go beyond military duty, hints of a relationship that has turned toxic and dangerous. Catherine walks slowly toward them, her chin raised defiantly despite her obvious fear. "Let Mr. Creek go, Marcus. He's done nothing wrong except show kindness to a stranger." Whitman's laugh is harsh and mocking. "Kindness to a stranger? Oh, Catherine, you always were naive. This man knows exactly who you are and what you've done." The mystery deepens as Samuel realizes there are layers of deception he has yet to uncover. Catherine's eyes meet his, and he sees something unexpected there. Not guilt or shame, but determination and a fierce intelligence that suggests she is not the helpless victim she initially appeared to be. "What documents did you steal, Miss Morrison?" Samuel asks directly, ignoring Whitman's sharp look of warning. Catherine's smile is bitter and knowing. "I didn't steal anything, Mr. Creek. I discovered something that certain people would prefer remain hidden." Whitman takes a threatening step forward, his weapon still trained on Catherine. "Enough of your lies. Tell him what you really are, Catherine. Tell him about the money you embezzled from the Army supply contracts." The accusation hangs in the air, but Samuel notices Catherine's reaction is not one of guilt but of frustrated anger. Her eyes flash with indignation rather than shame, suggesting Whitman's charges may be as false as they sound desperate. "The only crime I committed, Marcus, was falling in love with the wrong man," Catherine replies with quiet dignity, "and refusing to cover up your corruption when I discovered the truth." The revelation hits Samuel like a thunderbolt, suddenly illuminating the true nature of this confrontation. This is not a military operation to apprehend a thief, but a personal vendetta to silence a witness. Whitman's military bearing and organized pursuit take on a sinister new meaning as Samuel realizes he is dealing with a corrupt officer desperate to protect his criminal enterprise. "What kind of corruption?" Samuel presses, his tactical mind now fully engaged in unraveling the conspiracy. Catherine looks directly at Whitman as she speaks, her voice steady despite the mortal danger surrounding them. "Supply contract fraud. Marcus has been systematically overcharging the Army for provisions and pocketing the difference. Thousands of dollars stolen from funds meant to supply frontier outposts." Whitman's face contorts with rage, confirming the accuracy of her accusations. "You have no proof of those allegations," he snarls, but his defensive tone suggests otherwise. Catherine reaches for the locket at her throat, and Samuel understands with sudden clarity why she had been clutching it so protectively. "I have the ledgers, Marcus. All of them. Every fraudulent transaction. Every forged invoice. Every stolen dollar." The stakes of the confrontation have escalated beyond a simple manhunt to a matter of military justice and personal survival. Samuel realizes that Catherine Morrison is not a thief but a whistleblower, and Whitman's pursuit is designed to silence her permanently before she can expose his crimes to the authorities. The 20 armed men surrounding his property are not law enforcement officers but accomplices in a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of military command. "Those ledgers are stolen property," Whitman declares, but his voice lacks conviction. "Return them immediately, and perhaps we can discuss clemency." Catherine's laugh is sharp and humorless. "Clemency? From you? The same man who planned to have me killed to protect his precious secret." Samuel's blood runs cold at the implication. This is no longer about arrest and trial, but about cold-blooded murder disguised as military justice. His assessment of the situation shifts dramatically as he realizes that neither he nor Catherine will leave this encounter alive unless he acts decisively. The final pieces of the puzzle fall into place as Samuel understands the full scope of Whitman's desperation. A supply contract scandal of this magnitude would not only destroy the colonel's career but could result in court-martial and execution for treason. Catherine Morrison represents an existential threat to Whitman and everyone involved in the conspiracy, making her elimination not just desirable but necessary for their survival. "How many men are involved in this, Catherine?" Samuel asks, his mind already working through tactical options. Catherine's eyes remain fixed on Whitman as she replies, "Enough to make it worth killing for." The conspiracy goes all the way to divisional command. Whitman's desperation becomes palpable as he realizes his secrets are being exposed to yet another witness. "Shut up!" he roars, his weapon trembling with barely controlled fury. "Both of you shut up right now." But But Samuel and Catherine have moved beyond fear into the cold realm of survival calculation, each recognizing that their only chance lies in exposing the truth rather than submitting to Whitman's demands. The morning sun climbs higher, casting long shadows across the homestead as the confrontation reaches its climax. Samuel's military experience tells him that Whitman cannot afford to let either of them live, regardless of whether he recovers the ledgers. They have learned too much, become too dangerous to the conspiracy's survival. The 20 armed men positioned around his property are not there to make an arrest but to ensure that no witnesses survive to tell the tale. "Here's what's going to happen," Samuel says with the calm authority of a veteran soldier. "Miss Morrison and I are going to walk away from here, and you're going to let us go. In exchange, we'll give you a head start before we report this to the proper authorities." Whitman's sneer reveals his contempt for the proposal. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Creek. You're outnumbered 20-1 with nowhere to run." Samuel's smile is grim but confident, drawing on years of experience in impossible situations. "Colonel, you're making the same mistake the Apache made at Canyon Ridge. You're thinking about numbers instead of position." The reference to Canyon Ridge is deliberate, reminding everyone present of Samuel's reputation as a tactical genius who turned certain defeat into legendary victory. Whitman's confidence wavers slightly as he recalls the stories of that famous battle, where Samuel Creek's brilliant defensive strategy allowed a handful of cavalry scouts to defeat a much larger Apache war party. "This isn't Canyon Ridge, Creek," Whitman says, but uncertainty has crept into his voice. "And you don't have the cavalry riding to your rescue." Samuel's grin widens, revealing a confidence that makes several of Whitman's men shift nervously in their saddles. "No, Colonel, this isn't Canyon Ridge. It's better." With those words, Samuel gives a sharp whistle that echoes across the morning air. The sound is answered immediately by similar whistles from multiple directions, surrounding Whitman's forces with an invisible ring of response. The colonel's face goes white as he realizes he has walked into a trap as elegant and deadly as any Samuel Creek ever devised during his legendary military career. From concealed positions around the homestead, figures begin to emerge with weapons trained on Whitman's men. Samuel's neighbors, alerted by a prearranged signal system, have surrounded the property in a coordinated defensive maneuver that turns the tables completely. 12 weathered frontiersmen, all veterans of Indian wars and frontier conflicts, rise from carefully prepared positions with rifles aimed and ready. Whitman's numerical advantage has become a liability as his men find themselves caught in a crossfire with no clear escape route. "Gentlemen," Samuel calls out to his hidden allies, "meet Colonel Marcus Whitman and his associates. They seem to be under the impression that they can ride onto a man's property and threaten his guests without consequence." The homesteaders emerge fully from their concealment, revealing the careful preparation that went into this defense. Samuel Creek may have left the military, but he never stopped thinking like a soldier, and his reputation in the territory had earned him the loyalty of men willing to answer his call for help. The tables have turned completely as Whitman realizes he has been outmaneuvered by a superior tactician operating on familiar ground with loyal allies. His 20 men, spread out to surround the property, now find themselves isolated and vulnerable to concentrated fire from entrenched defenders who know every inch of the terrain. "How?" Whitman gasps, his military precision crumbling under the shock of sudden reversal. Samuel's expression remains calm and professional, the demeanor of a man who has faced death too many times to be rattled by desperate threats. "Simple planning and good neighbors, Colonel. When you spend 3 years helping folks through hard times, they tend to remember when you need help yourself." The morning air crackles with tension as both sides assess the new tactical situation, but the advantage has shifted decisively to Samuel's forces. Catherine Morrison steps closer to Samuel, her fear replaced by amazement at the sudden transformation of their desperate situation. "How did you know they would come?" she asks quietly. Samuel keeps his eyes fixed on Whitman as he replies, "Didn't know for certain, but a man doesn't survive long on the frontier without preparing for trouble. When you arrived this morning, I sent up a smoke signal that told my neighbors to get ready for whatever was coming." The revelation of Samuel's foresight adds another layer to his growing legend, demonstrating the tactical thinking that made him famous in military circles. Every action since Catherine's arrival has been part of a larger defensive strategy, from her placement in the barn to his seemingly casual conversation with Whitman. The homesteader has been conducting a complex military operation disguised as a simple confrontation, drawing his enemies into a carefully prepared killing field. Whitman's desperation reaches its peak as he realizes the full extent of his tactical disaster. His corruption exposed, his military career destroyed, and his life hanging by a thread, he makes the desperate decision of a cornered animal. "If I'm going down," he snarls, raising his weapon toward Catherine, "I'm taking her with me." The morning explodes into violence as Whitman's finger tightens on the trigger, but Samuel is already moving, his own weapon clearing leather with the speed that made him legendary. The sharp crack of gunfire echoes across the prairie as both men fire simultaneously, their bullets crossing in the morning air with deadly intent. Catherine screams as she throws herself aside, while all around the homestead, the careful balance of the standoff collapses into chaos and gunsmoke. When the smoke clears and the echoes of gunfire fade across the Montana prairie, Marcus Whitman lies motionless in the dust, his corruption and conspiracy buried with him in the soil of Samuel Creek's homestead. Samuel stands over the body, his smoking Colt still in his hand, blood seeping from a shoulder wound that testament to Whitman's final, desperate accuracy. Around the property, Whitman's surviving men have surrendered to the superior firepower and position of Samuel's allies, their weapons thrown down in recognition of their hopeless situation. The conspiracy that threatened to destroy Catherine Morrison and countless others has been broken by the courage of a simple homesteader and the loyalty of his neighbors. As the sun reaches its zenith over the Montana territory, Catherine Morrison kneels beside Samuel as his neighbors tend to his wound. The ledgers that nearly cost both their lives are safe, ready to be delivered to honest military authorities who will ensure justice is served. "Why did you risk your life for a stranger?" Catherine asks, her voice filled with gratitude and wonder. Samuel's smile is tired but genuine as he looks across his hard-won homestead toward the endless horizon. "Sometimes a man has to stand up for what's right, regardless of the cost. Besides, miss, you weren't really a stranger. Any daughter of General Morrison was welcome in my home. No questions asked." The prairie wind carries their words away across the vast landscape, where the legend of Samuel Creek's stand against corruption will be told around campfires for generations to come. The aftermath reveals the full scope of Whitman's conspiracy as investigators sent from Washington discover evidence of systematic fraud, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from Army supply budgets. Catherine Morrison's courage in exposing the truth leads to the arrest and conviction of 17 officers involved in the scheme, cleaning up one of the most significant cases of military corruption in frontier history. Samuel Creek recovers from his wounds to become something of a local hero, his homestead a symbol of individual courage standing against institutional corruption. The story of the poor homesteader who gave shelter to a fleeing maiden and found himself defending truth and justice against overwhelming odds becomes part of the folklore of the American West, where ordinary people sometimes accomplish extraordinary things through simple decency and unwavering courage.